to the February Chamber of Business Connects with Government luncheon. I'm Scott McMeans. I'm a co-chair of the Legislative Committee along with Jill Hennessy. I know many of you have joined us, so welcome, and we have some of our other committee members here as well. Well, it's nice and frigid and frozen outside. Hopefully we'll stay warm with the nice windows and the nice view we have looking over the river and the lake. So I'd like to get us going here with our keynote speaker this afternoon. I'd like to introduce Rich Zipperer, who is serves as the Deputy Chief of Staff and Senior Counsel to Governor Scott Walker. Prior to joining the Walker administration in 2012, Mr. Zipperer had served in the Wisconsin State Legislature, was elected to the Assembly back in 2006 and re-elected in 2008, and then in 2010 served in the Senate, representing the 33rd Senate District, which is portions of Waukesha and Washington counties. In the state Senate, Rich served in the committees of Judiciary, Utilities, Commerce, and Government Operations, which he chaired, the Joint Committee on Finance, as well as the Committee on State and Federal Relations and Information Technology. While serving in the Assembly, Senator Zipperer at the time had worked as an attorney in private practice, which I assume that you're not doing that.
Not anymore.
Okay.
Plenty of work to do.
And his focus was small business law, estate planning, and probate. So prior to his legislative career, Rich served as U.S. Congressman under Jim Sensenbrenner's district as Sensenbrenner's district director and deputy chief of staff. Went to Reedsville Public High School, so he is familiar with this area. As well as getting his degrees at St. Norbert, George Washington University, and Georgetown University Law Center. Rich is married with his wife and Rita, has 3 children. They live in the city of Pewaukee, where they're active members of St. Anthony's on the Lake Catholic Church, which actually I think I've been there.
Yeah?
To be honest, yeah. And he's a member of the Pewaukee Chamber of Commerce, so he's familiar with, I think, the session as well. And that's in Waukesha, and he's part of the Washington County Republican Party State Bar Association of Wisconsin, and he's a board member of Bethany Christian Services Adoption Orphan Care Agency of Wisconsin. And I think that's all you consider.
That's a lot.
Yeah, so without further ado, Mr. Zipperer.
Great. Well, if you can all hear me in the back, I'd prefer to go without the microphone, but if you can't, just let me know and I'll go over there. But yeah, it's an honor to be here, and thank you. And when Scott asked after meeting in Madison a while back if I would come up to Manitowoc, I said absolutely, because frankly when I'm here I feel like I'm a little bit like I'm on vacation or it's a holiday or something, because my parents still live up here, most of my family still lives up here. When I get a chance to go deer hunting or go away on Christmas, I'm usually somewhere around Manitowoc County, so it's always good to be back here, and I'm glad to be able to chat about some of the things we're working on in Madison right now with this group. So, thanks. I guess I think the most topical thing I can talk about is the state budget. And the state budget, as many of you probably know, in Wisconsin operates on a 2-year cycle, and we're about to go into the start of a second 2-year cycle where the governor will unveil his budget, send it to some wise legislators who are here in the room today and others for their review, and kind of set the priorities for the state for the next 2 years. And that's kind of the way we see it from the governor's office, is what are the key problems in the state of Wisconsin that need to be addressed, and how can we use kind of the existing resources that we have to best meet those needs in the state. I think if we take a look from where Governor Walker started a couple of years ago to where we are now, feel like we've accomplished a lot as a legislator who was there voting for some of it and then now serving in the governor's office. I think the policies that we implemented, although obviously having gone through a fair amount of controversy in the press and having recall elections and things like that, certainly generated a lot of attention. I think taking a look back now, we feel very comfortable with where we are, having gone from a $3.6 billion budget deficit just a couple of years ago to running consecutive years of surpluses, contributions into the state's rainy day fund, and talking about how we can make use of the surplus that the state budget is now operating in. So it makes it a lot easier to come to a group like this and talk about what we're going to do with the surplus that's been generated, instead of talking about how do we address the deficit. So that certainly makes it easy. The governor has made it very clear since the day I've started with him what his priorities are. He's mapped out 5 priorities, and those will be the priorities in his budget. And I'll just kind of walk through those here today, tell you a little bit how they'll relate to the budget and the legislature this upcoming session, talk about a few other issues besides what's in the budget, and then Scott asked me to talk a little bit about healthcare as well, which kind of sprinkles in throughout some of those priorities. And I'll do that at the end, and then if you folks have questions, be happy to answer them right at the end. So I think probably anybody in this room could guess what priority number 1 is: jobs. Jobs in the economy has been the number 1 priority in Madison for the legislative majorities there, and for the governor for as long as they've been there. Obviously, I think we've seen some progress in the state. We stopped, the slide of losing jobs that was going on a little more than 2 years ago, turned that into job creation. But I don't think anybody's ready to say, hey, the job's done, we've got enough jobs in Wisconsin, we're all content. So we obviously feel like there's a lot of work to be done. I think the number 1 jobs issue that's being talked about, you're probably reading in the paper about, hearing on the radio about, right now is mining. That bill is certainly on its way through the legislature. I think there's an executive session planned this week to vote to continue to move the bill forward. The bill is progressing on the traditional path in the legislature: public hearing, executive session. It has to go to the Finance Committee because it has the potential to generate revenue should a mine operate in the state of Wisconsin. And the governor is certainly hopeful that it will come to his desk in the next few weeks to months. The potential there for jobs is just enormous, and although the mine is not necessarily located near Manitowoc or near Waukesha County, with the part of the state that I'm from, when I was in the Senate and the Assembly, where I couldn't go to a local business, a foundry, a metal shop, tool and die shop, where they wouldn't tell me, if you can get that mining bill passed and they operate a mine, this thing we make right over here, that's going to be, the market for that is going to increase because of the mine. And it's been amazing to me to find out all the businesses in Wisconsin that have become accustomed to selling all of their merchandise for mining, selling that overseas, other states, other country, and so many of them tell me, boy, we would be so proud to be able to have that equipment be sold and used to make Wisconsin jobs in northern Wisconsin, especially in a part of the state that's been suffering for so long economically. So that's been bill number 1 in the Assembly and the Senate. Obviously part of the jobs message, priority number 1 for the governor, but that's certainly not the whole story. I think another issue you've probably started to hear about is the governor's talking about tax relief. And obviously since he's been as a governor, and frankly even when he was county executive, been focused on the issue of property tax relief, as that's a tax that so many Wisconsin families feel, and it's such a pinch to them, whether you're a young family, trying to raise your kids and make sure they get a good education in a good neighborhood where you want to live, or whether you're a senior trying to stay in your home. Property taxes are a huge impact in the state, and we've had a pretty strong record. This governor's done a lot to ensure that property taxes stay low, and he's going to be, that you can expect that to continue throughout this budget, that the focus on property tax relief will not go away. What we probably will be able to see in this budget, and this is good news, that we haven't seen in past budgets recently, is income tax relief. Thankfully, with the economy coming back and with the fiscal restraints that have been put in place in Madison, surpluses have been generated, and we think that one of the best things you can do with that to encourage economic growth is to allow the folks who are out in the private sector creating jobs to keep more of the money that they're earning in their pockets and use it to reinvest either in their families or if you're a small business, in your business, and to help grow the business. So the tax relief that the governor has been talking about, and I think you can expect to see going forward him proposing, will be tax relief focused kind of on middle class. It was kind of, as we've looked at the statistics, you probably all hear about Wisconsin's ranked, among the 10 worst states in the country for, most taxed populations, and we certainly are there. And then you take a closer look and you kind of break it down, and you see for folks on the lower income levels, we're kind of about middle of the pack as far as our treatment compared to other states. For folks on the higher income level, we're somewhere around 12 to 15. But where we're the harshest compared to other states is folks right in the middle income. And at a time when we're all talking about how's the middle class getting by, to see that Wisconsin is not is being harsher on the middle class in terms of how it treats middle class families on the tax brackets. To see Wisconsin there was something I think certainly caught his attention, and something that he wanted to rectify. So I think you can expect the income tax proposal from the governor to be focused on helping the economy create jobs, to be focused on helping middle class families be able to keep more of their own money, pay their own bills, and to be focused on kind of getting our state back onto the economic growth pattern that we've seen in the past. So so that'll be a major priority that the governor will unveil exactly the details of it in his budget address just about 2 weeks from now. So property taxes, mining, venture capital, continuing regulatory reforms, I think those are all part of what the governor sees as a way to kind of continue to turn our economic climate around and make Wisconsin a place that folks are going to want to do business, want to raise a family, and create jobs in. So that's obviously topic number one. Related to it, you'll see the other 4 priorities of the 5, a lot of them relate right back to the first one, which is jobs. Is workforce development. Talking to a couple of folks here, I think this is probably a topic of interest for this crowd. We hear a lot about the skills gap in Wisconsin and how there are a number of employers who are willing to hire, and there are a lot of folks looking for work. The question is, how do you get those two to meet with the skills that the employers need? How do you get workers who are out there trying to find jobs, trying to support their families, the skills that they need to fill what's needed in the marketplace? And I think we've seen that as an opportunity to have perhaps a quicker impact on the economy, is if we can get those workers the skills, the jobs are there and available. So we've looked at very closely how do we kind of step up our training programs in the state, how do we make them more responsive to what's going on in the marketplace, how do we make them more responsive to the actual needs of employers, how do we provide incentives in the education system, both on the technical side and in, from public schools to the universities, how do we make them more responsive to what the folks are going to need in the marketplace? And we're putting together a couple of proposals in that area as well, and both inside the budget and outside the budget, there are plans being put together to have grants be focused on filling that skills gap. And part of that is a system called Labor Market Information System that a number of states have started to use, that we're very interested in, to find a way to accurately measure what's going on in the marketplace, find the jobs that are open, instead of just having them posted on a job bank and say kind of go fish and hope somebody goes and finds those jobs. Tie that information into our workforce development program, provide access to our educational system, and provide that information to workers who are out there in the real world looking for jobs, so that we can match training, available jobs, and available workers all together in a coherent system. And that's something we're looking to implement going forward this year as well. So workforce development obviously ties to education, and that's priority number 3. Education is something that has generated a number of stories already. I think is near and dear to those of us like myself who have young children, and anybody who is concerned about how are they going to find a job going forward into the future. We're finally in a position, while last session, well, a lot of it was about the collective bargaining changes and how do we get control of state spending in these areas. Now, because we have kind of taken that difficult medicine, we're now in a position where we can continue to increase our investment in education, and that is definitely something the governor is looking at doing, in a number of ways. Here is an area that I think a greater emphasis will be placed on performance, that like the workforce development area, no one wants to just throw more dollars at a problem anymore and cross our fingers and hope it fixes it. That instead of just taking dollars, saying we're sending it there and acting like the problem's solved, we want to have real performance measures in place that are going to say, is this a method that's helping improve educational performance in our state? Is this leading to employment down the road? Is this leading to a kind of closing the skills gap or the education gap that we've seen in some schools? And how do we help failing schools improve? You probably saw the first step of that already with the school report cards that came out. If you have kids like I do, or others, the governor I know told me he went and looked up his kid's school right away. You can go online, you can find your kids' schools, look at the school report card, and get an idea of how they're performing, both in terms of academic achievement and things that are available at the school. It's a great way that we're kind of finally starting to measure schools and in their performance. As much as we love Friday night basketball and football games, that's not always the best way to measure how the school is actually performing and teaching our children. Now we've got a way, instead of looking in the conference standings on sports scores, we've got a way that we can actually see how are these schools doing. And obviously that report card is going to have to continually get refined to make it the best measure we can. But now that we can measure, now we can start allocating dollars and resources both to encourage folks and encourage schools to reach for the higher levels of improvement, and then looking on the other side of the scale and saying, what's happening to those kids in the failing schools? How can we help turn those failing schools around? And how can we give those parents and those kids as many options as they can to get those kids the education that they need? So it's a matter of investment, providing the right incentives, and encouraging performance in those areas. Also in education, one of the areas the governor has really emphasized is third grade reading. Started to make some progress towards that with the Read to Lead initiatives I know the legislators here know about from last session. I think you can expect us to continue to make steps towards that. And the governor says it all the time, so I'll just use his line. From kindergarten to third grade, kids learn to read, and then from that point on, they read to learn. And if you're not able to read at third grade, you're just going to continue to fall behind and fall behind and fall behind. And unfortunately, we've seen that in some of the districts where students have incredibly high dropout rates and high truancy rates, that it's been a reading problem from third grade. And if you can address that early on, you can often address a lot of the other problems that come in after that. So that'll be an area of focus as well. Going into that is obviously point number 4 is government reform, which comes back to the educational changes from the last budget and from the collective bargaining changes. Obviously, it was a major significant government reform, but we think that continues to go forward with allowing the local control that maybe you haven't seen before as a major point of government reform, where now we have school districts with more freedom than they had before to engage in kind of be laboratories of experiments of ways that we can find innovation in our school districts to help continue to move education forward, where each of the school districts can continue to learn from each other and do what they think is appropriate for their school districts. But also in the area of government reform, we've taken a couple of steps. The governor has created the Governor's Waste, Fraud, and Abuse Commission, doing a top-down review of state agencies and what's occurring out there. Obviously, we've been hearing stories of fraud and abuse, and a number of these have been uncovered by the commission. They've already recognized tens of millions of dollars of savings to the state, and that effort is going to continue. And then in his State of the State address, the governor rolled out a report of a regulatory review commission that he had done, that we had conducted, kind of asking small businesses and others dealing with regulations around the state to bring to us their concerns with regulations. Let us review them, see what's going on with them, see what makes sense, see what doesn't make sense, we've taken that report from the governor, given it to the Assembly. The Assembly already on their own, to their credit, was engaged in a top-down review of every single regulation on the books. So Chairman Jock over there, I know, is going to have responsibility for reviewing a number of regulations, and I know that's going on in almost every Assembly committee. What we've done is by compiling the report, given a few targets that we think, hey, here are a few that we think merit the most attention. We hear about it all the time of, you know, a business owner feeling like, boy, I'd rather focus on running my business than filling out this paperwork, or why do I have to send the same form to the federal government as I do to the state government? A lot of those things are things we want to clean up, fix up, and try to allow our state to be a little bit more business friendly, while still keeping in place, obviously, the environmental protections, the safety protections, the consumer protections, that the rules were there in the first place. But make sure that the rules are focused on doing what they were there for, and not just adding an extra layer of bureaucracy. So those are the top 4 priorities. Priority number 5 is infrastructure. And that is a growing area, especially in the area of technology, broadband, internet. You know, having a family that lives in rural Wisconsin, I know how important it is to be able to have broadband there, because frankly that's what the business world today depends on. If you don't have broadband access, it's not very likely that you're going to be able to operate a successful business, obviously depending on what you're doing. But that's rural economic development if you don't have broadband access in rural areas, and that's an important part of infrastructure. But obviously another part of infrastructure is the highway system. That's an important part of our state system, from, you know, the old days, from the dairy, which is still operating, being able to get milk from the farm out to the market, to Miller being able to get its products through the zoo interchange down to Chicago, out to Madison, around the state, where we have growing costs. Obviously the costs in these areas have not gone down, but we have a declining revenue, or a flat revenue source, because frankly because the mileage per gallon has increased, and the revenues generated per mile driven has only gone down with the advent of higher miles per gallon cars. The revenue source, if you look at it, is flat, and the cost curve is continuing to go up. So we have a long-term problem. The long-term problem was exacerbated by the fact that the previous governor had taken out large sums of money from the transportation fund and diverted them over to the general fund to be spent on other purposes. So in the meantime, we can return those funds to help shore up the general fund and pay back, shore up the transportation fund, pay back the monies that were spent there. But at the long term, we're going to have to address those needs, especially on maintenance of major highways in the state that just about every business depends on to get its products to market. So I guess the other part of infrastructure, and I'll use as my segue to get to healthcare, is the healthcare infrastructure system in the state, and the dependence of a lot of folks on the care that they need, they get from the state. I think a lot of people don't realize the growing costs of Medicaid and what that has meant for the state budget. While there's been stories of the state surplus, I don't think a lot of folks know that just to continue the Medicaid system that we have, the cost to continue going into the next budget would mean $700 million additional dollars being spent. So that takes up a big chunk of any additional money coming into the state, and that is a growing question when combined in conjunction with the federal legislation, and whatever you want to call it, the ACA, PPACA, Obamacare. That legislation prompts a discussion in a number of states of how are we going to address Medicaid long term. So the governor has made a couple of decisions, one not directly tied to the budget, which was to not operate a state health care exchange and instead defer to the federal government and have them operate the exchange. The primary driver of that decision was the unknown costs that were coming into the state to operate it, combined with the fact that, well, even if we took on the challenge of paying for and operating an exchange, all of the real decision-making authority would still rest in Washington, D.C. So we could have taken on the cost, we could have done it ourselves, we could have tried to put our own stamp on it, run it, make it a Wisconsin exchange built to accommodate our unique market, and then still have to go to Washington, D.C. and ask for permission to do exactly what they wanted to do at the end and could have rewritten it. Our concern at the end of the day was being stuck with a bill for something we frankly did not control. And that, I think, leads into the conversation on the large dollars, which we're talking about in the Medicaid decision. So if you're not aware, I'm sure Scott is from being associated with a hospital, and any of the folks in the hospital know this is a major issue pending. But as part of the federal legislation, promises have been made, that if states expand their Medicaid coverage, federal dollars would flow to the state to help compensate that. In the early years, they would pay 100% of the cost, dwindling to 90% later, and beyond that is anyone's guess. So the governor is currently contemplating that offer from the federal government as to how the state should look at Medicaid in the future. Obviously, what looks like free money up front is very appealing to a number of states who have chosen to go that route. A number of states have not chosen to go that route, and I think largely based on the idea that while it may look good up front, it may look like a good deal. The way I analogize this is my generation, so I'm dating myself, but when you used to get those CDs in the mail from Columbia House that would say you could buy, get eight CDs free with, buy one more or buy three more. Well, those 8 free CDs sure looked good when I was 13 years old, but I didn't know how much it was going to cost, those other CDs coming down the line, and I sure didn't know that if I didn't put my stamp on and return back every month the card, I would get a bunch of CDs I didn't want in the mail. That's kind of the concern, is what's this program going to become in the future? And while it may look good today, how much is this going to cost, and is the federal commitment to paying it really going to be there in the future? So those are kind of the factors that have to be weighed as to what's the best long-term plan to make sure we can cover folks who are truly most in need with Medicaid dollars, realizing that the state's Medicaid dollars are limited, and realizing that given the federal deficit, given what's going on in Washington, D.C., the promise of today may not necessarily be the promise of tomorrow. So that's a major decision that will be announced between now and when the governor unveils his budget in about 2 weeks. So that's a quick overview of kind of some of the issues pending in Madison. Don't know how close to on time I am, but from there I'd be happy to answer any questions either on what I talked about or anything else out there. I see I got one already.
A recent article came out, and it was an audit of the UW system's health insurance, and they had found about $33 million, if I got the number right.
Yeah.
Is the governor going to take a look at the UW system in whole and see what else is lying under there to see what other savings can be accomplished?
Yeah, absolutely we are. First of all, on those savings, the money that was found or lost there, found to be lost, I guess is the best way to phrase it, is a huge concern, because this isn't the first time that the UW has had a similar problem. You probably recall back from computer system issues that had occurred just a few years ago, that it's been something that's happened far too often. So, we've been kind of getting regular reports on how they're doing and recollecting that. We've let them know that, listen, you lost that money, you're responsible for that money in your budget. The rest of the state budget is not going to suffer because of that. And I think this is something both the legislature is very interested in and our office is very interested in, is ensuring that the tax dollars that are spent over there are spent effectively, and that they need to understand that they can't depend on unlimited GPR and unlimited tuition increases and not worry about how they're spending it, and that more accountability is going to be expected. And that kind of goes back to the larger principle of paying for performance, measuring results, and saying what are the taxpayers getting for their dollars and their investment that they're putting in. So, good question. Any other questions? Yeah?
I'll take a question so people can formulate their other questions.
Sure.
You know, I think there's been recently some published information relative to public safety and the cost or maybe the lack of savings to the taxpayers for the police, you know, relative to their contribution like the other sectors.
Yeah.
And I think 60 million or somewhere around there was kind of thrown. Is that something that the governor has continued to evaluate relative to his decisions from, you know, Act 10 in terms of including or not including public safety in that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously this was, I wasn't part of the administration when that decision was made, but, you know, I was certainly part of the Senate caucus, as was Senator Liebbaum, and I remember the governor coming and explaining that to us, that certainly that was factored in. I think, you know, the way the decision is looked at is, you know, we had to do what we had to do to get the fiscal house in order, to get ourselves back to a balanced budget, and that's, you know, 2 years out now. It seems pretty clear that has succeeded in accomplishing that. Providing, you know, local tools to manage what they could there. From the long-term perspective, you know, and I think he has made pretty clear, well, whether it's this issue of, you know, including police into those changes, or right to work, or in other areas, he has kind of gone to the side of saying, you know, we've got our fiscal house in order. Now let's get our economy growing, and let's get, you know, back to kind of stable business as usual kind of in Wisconsin, where instead of, you know, more kind of controversy, attracting another 100,000 protesters, going through another round of recalls, it's kind of the time to kind of get Wisconsin and get back to work and get kind of focused on these things. So, you know, I think we've kind of said it, is you probably just heard what I walked through here. You know, none of these are proposals that are going to get 100,000 people energized to come. This is, you know, to come protest on one side or another. It's about getting our economy right and getting the focus back on economic growth, education, you know, closing the skills gap, so that we can get what I think is our #1 priority, is a strong growing economy. So I think that's why it was a conscious decision, you know, through this budget to not go in that direction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rich, you mentioned the skills gap. Has there been any meaningful conversations about incentivizing people to move into training in the high demand areas, so machining, you know, welding, industrial maintenance, where we know there's a shortage? It would seem to me that, I mean, we're doing a lot of the right things in terms of educating young folks on the viability of these careers, but I think it might take just a little bit more of an incentive to, you know, possibly pay for part of the tuition, you know, at a technical college, and I work for a technical college, so, you know, a disclaimer.
No.
But I think that might really have some merit.
No, you're exactly right, and that's when I'm using kind of the phrase performance, or talking about performance funding. That's where it goes to both to the institutions that are doing and encouraging the individuals to go into those fields. The whole labor market information system that I mentioned is designed to help ensure the public knows, because, you know, sometimes we can all, you know, feel informed and we kind of know which areas are growing, healthcare fields, machining fields, but not always, the unemployed folks don't always know, and making sure we get that information to them, you know, whether it's through the unemployment office or through other places, getting them that information, letting them know of available education opportunities in those fields, making sure the education opportunities that are there have a good connection to both the folks that need the training and the employers, and tying that together. But you're right, they need the incentives. I think you'll see the programs as the governor kind of talks about them and unveils them are very much targeted to meeting those targeted fields that have the growth, whether it's healthcare, which has obviously seen a bunch of growing needs in the area, or whether it's in manufacturing. Welding is an area, you know, in southeast Wisconsin that's certainly talked about a lot, machining and those skills, of making sure that as we're investing our dollars, we're investing them into fields that can generate jobs is a huge part about closing the skills gap. Because I think a lot of people would say, well, we sure are investing a lot of dollars in this area, but are we making the best use of those dollars if it's designed to get those folks to work? So, yeah.
On the same note, like, I work at Seek, and my clients that I deal with, they want the work experience and they want the skill, and they want the education. So, you know, I think going in, it's great that we're going to give this to the people that, you know, educate the people that want the skills, but maybe on that other end, give something to the employers too. You know, if you take this person on, because you can't, it's not, they're not looking at it as a win-win. Like, okay, I'm getting this person in that they only have the technical skills, they don't have the on-the-job training. What does their work ethic look like? So if we give them a chance, let's give them a break too. I think that would be something to have to take into consideration also.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we kind of hear it all the time. When I was in the state legislature, and I'm sure the legislators here have the same experience. They'll go to employers that will tell them, boy, I've got 5 spots. I'd love to hire somebody if I felt like, you know, I know they would be on time. I know they would be drug-free. I know that if I put in a year of training with them, that they would still be here, and that they would be committed to staying here. And then, you know, I would be happy to invest those dollars in. So from the employer's perspective, there's kind of a reluctance to get too involved. Kind of, you know, some of them feel like I've been burned before, is kind of a way that they'll say it. And it's a matter of making sure that we're connecting the right, you know, the folks who are out there looking for work, to getting them the skills with actual employers who have jobs, and kind of tying that together a little tighter than it has been in the past.
And a lot of times we see the problem with people coming in that have this college degree and this certain skill, but there's something else about that person that won't allow them to go to that employer. So maybe educating them, I guess example being, you know, you have somebody that went to, or that was in prison for stealing checks, writing bad checks, and now you have them come in, now they're an accountant.
Yeah.
Well, how is that even possible? Why do they even take their money or even educate? And not that, not to discriminate at all, but that's what we see, you know, and it's like, how do you explain that to them without discriminating against them, that this is why they're not going to take you?
Yeah. Well, another thing we've seen is kind of how do you spark an interest, especially kind of in the younger generation, in some of the jobs that are available out there, where they might say, you know, well, I don't want to work in a factory. That's a kind of a dirty job. I don't want to, you know, anything to do with that. And then you know, in Waukesha County, the chamber there has a great program that will bring students in to see and say, look, you know, this is a computer job. Yeah, you may be on a factory floor, but you're running advanced software and using your computer skills, and while you're doing it, you're seeing a product that you're actually producing over here on the other side, which is pretty neat to a lot of them. They had no idea that that's what goes on behind the 4 walls of the factories that a lot of folks drive by, the tool and die shops and some of those things. So the more we can educate some of these folks about those opportunities that are there, you know, how much the pay is in some of those places that a lot of the younger folks don't know about, is pretty eye-opening. It's been an interesting way to get them involved in the workforce. Yeah?
I was wondering if Governor Walker's commitment to infrastructure is going to extend down to the local level, where we might see an increase in transportation aids and shared revenue.
Sure. Obviously, that's a part of it. You know, I'm not here to announce anything new. The governor gets to do that. But what you know, what I can say is, from local roads, you know, it's similar. You know, for myself, having grown up in the countryside here, you know how important those are. Just like broadband, if you don't have, you know, good road system in the countryside, if you don't have, you know, highways connecting Manitowoc to markets, other places, likewise, if you don't have them in our rural areas, that's an important area as well. So clearly, from local governments, larger cities, small governments, it's all going to be an important part of it. Now the state obviously has a number of high-profile projects going on from the zoo interchange and other areas. But that doesn't mean we can lose sight of both the maintenance and then the local aids that are out there as well. We certainly recognize that. Yeah.
Rich, another topic that's pretty important locally here is the regionalization of the RLFs, revolving loan funds.
Yeah.
And I know Representative Jack got this question a couple weeks ago at the ENC breakfast, but locally here in Manitowoc and Two Rivers, we do a great job of managing our RLFs. And it would be disadvantageous to have to go to a regionalization model. Where is Governor Walker on this issue? Or is he pretty much leading up the WEDC to make a recommendation, or does he have any influence, and what's the position on it?
Sure. I mean, obviously, I think he would be very interested in what the WEDC is recommending, and he would be also interested in hearing, what the local folks are saying, and those that are going to be directly impacted from the program are saying. I can say, what's the impetus driving the potential, for the change is the idea of, a number of folks wanting to go into a direction of saying, removing silos and saying, it doesn't matter where economic opportunity is going to come. Let's direct the dollars to wherever we determine they can be most effective. Now, the counter to that would be some folks would say, well, some parts of the states are going to do better than others, and economic opportunity in one part of the state may not be as beneficial as it is in the other. And that's kind of the argument that will have to play out both through the WEDC and in the legislature and in other places is, do we want to give, the ability for the dollars to flow, say, would we be willing to take the risk that a substantial amount of the dollars might go to some part of the state if it's determined that that's the most effective and efficient way of using those dollars, knowing that some portion may disproportionately benefit than others? Or would we rather say, we want to even out those dollars around the state and let each area determine what's the best for their area? So those are kind of the competing demands in that area, at least. Anything else? Yeah?
So the income tax reduction that the governor's going to do, I guess one word you could have heard is a nominal reduction. Why isn't he taking a bigger swing at it? You have the right political makeup right now. We're running surpluses in a low economic time, so I expect tax revenues to increase as the economy increases, both regionally and nationally. Why isn't he taking a bigger swing at it?
Yeah, I think we expect the same thing. As the economy continues to turn around, we would hopefully generate more revenues. I think reducing this, providing income tax relief here, sends a message, especially to other states, neighboring states, where they're going in the exact opposite direction. That income tax relief is coming here. We also want to be very mindful not to engage in the type of behavior that put us into the deficit in the first place. While some folks in the past, or some governors in the past, either spent wildly and on unsustainable programs that they didn't have budgeted for the out years, this governor wanted to make very clear he was going to provide tax relief that was paid for within the budget, that didn't set us up for future deficits. Knowing, kind of the old trick in the past was to provide some tax relief and in a 2-year budget, put it in the second year, or put it in the second half of the second year, and then all of the real, benefits of the tax relief would be seen at the end, in out years in the budget that weren't on your balance sheet over the 2-year requirement. So we could have done that, the governor could have put together a proposal that backloaded an enormous tax cut in out years that wouldn't be paid for. But what we said was that would create another structural deficit, the likes of which we had been concerned with beginning. And it goes back to we're trying not to overpromise. We're trying to send a message that Wisconsin's fiscal house is back in order, which it clearly is. Payments going back into the rainy day fund, and we're running surpluses, and that we don't want to jeopardize our future. Whether sometime down the line, if there would be another legislature or another governor to say, we can't afford these, we're going to go to the spending route, or we're going to go to a tax route, we're going to go in a different direction. We want to make sure that we're using the revenues that are generated to provide tax relief within this budget and set us up in the future for future tax relief. So the governor has made it very clear that when he's done with this tax cut in this budget, that's not where he thinks tax rates need to be in Wisconsin long term. He's going to think they're going to need to be lower than that, and he's going to want to continue to work to reduce those rates, but to do them as we can afford them within our budget, do them in a responsible way that's paid for within our budget, instead of putting us back on the track kind of where we were under previous administrations of a huge structural deficit. So that's the reason. Certainly he doesn't believe that he's going to be able to provide all of the tax relief that he thinks needs to be changed in Wisconsin already in one budget. So.
Any other questions? Okay, well, I'd like to thank you for coming in to enlighten us, and
thank you.
We'll look forward to a budget.